Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Beatrix Neyman from Beatrix Designs. Here you will learn how to master Tunisian crochet and much more. If you don't want to miss anything, remember to subscribe and hit the bell, or you can visit my website at www.beatrixdesigns.co.za. Enjoy! There are quite a few troubleshooting areas in Tunisian crochet, and today we will look at only a few of them. We will look at how to count rows correctly, how to combat that typical curl in Tunisian crochet, how to beat the bias of your work, how to handle those sloppy sides, and then how to identify left from right. Two common problem areas that I will just mention now, but I will not show you in detail how to combat that, is one, this slip knot that we start with on our foundation chain that makes an unsightly knot, and it always tends to pull open and pull down on the edge and on the corner here on our foundation row. Now what I do, and I'll just quickly show it to you because I have a detailed explanation on that on my video for lesson 1 that is all about the foundation chain and the foundation row. But here I will just quickly show you what I do is when I make my slip knot, I use that as my first chain. So I do not close it up to make the knot, but I leave it open so that I can count that as my first chain and work in it when I do my first forward pass on the foundation row. And here you can see it is still open. So what I will do when I finished my foundation row, I will just pull on my yarn tail so it will close up, and it will work very similar like a magic ring in crochet. So here I can show you in comparison the two different ways. Having your slip knot here in the corner and having a slip knot that you closed, work and use it like a magic ring and close it up, it does not pull down and that unsightly knot is gone. The other problem in Tunisian crochet that I do discuss in more detail on another video, which will be lesson 3 on the Tunisian simple stitch, is how to work that last stitch correctly. As a beginner, normally that is the first and most common mistake that we make, is not working that last stitch correctly. And just giving you a quick recap on that is that you insert your hook behind the front vertical bar of that last stitch, as well as this back bar that was created by the chain when you do the chain on your return pass. But go to my video on lesson 3, the Tunisian simple stitch. There I explain it to you in more detail and more clearly so that you can understand how to work that last stitch. We simply do have to talk a bit about tension as well. Now I'm just going to show you the tricks or the things that you can do and try to keep your tension equal if that is something that you do struggle with. Now let me first show you during the forward pass. It is very important that the loops that's on your hook, you keep that on the shaft of your hook, because this is what is indicating the size of your stitch. I keep it on my finger. because sometimes the minute that it glides into the throat of the hook, in this throat it is much smaller, so it pulls the stitch or the loop smaller, and even if you go back onto the shaft, you can even hear it's way more tight than if I just hold it onto the shaft the same size as it is, keep the forefinger on top of it, yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up the loop. Now I will do it with the same with the next loop. I will keep my forefinger on it so it keeps the size of my shaft. Insert, yarn over, keep my finger on that. Alright, so that when I move it back into the throat, it does not close up. Use your fingers. That's why we have 10 of them. And in Tunisian crochet you will find that many times we do need all 10 of them. Now I'm just going to finish this forward pass quickly so that we can get to the return pass, because there it's also very important for me to show what to do. Again, the finger on the loop on the hook, but now the difference is here. The minute that I yarn over to pull through 2 loops, if I do not pinch that loop at the bottom when it's the right size, I kind of pinch it like that and then pull my loop through so that the size of it can stay the same. If I do not do that and I just leave it loose, you will clearly see the size of these loops in between becomes way bigger. Let me do these with pinching onto those chains. Can you see it's smaller than the first ones that I did not pinch? And your return pass indicates the width of your work, so it will grow bigger. If you have a specific gauge that you need to work, it will be bigger than it should be. And working your forward pass, these loops that you create on the hook determine the length of your work. So keeping your tension equal and correct according to the size of your hook will really help with having the correct gauge if you are following a certain pattern. I'll just show you again what I do in slow motion. Use your fingers. And I will just do a little bit of return here. Can you see I'm pinching here at the base of the chain for the return? And I keep my fingers again on my loops on the hook. And that is just to keep my tension equal. Now this is just some practice. Go and practice that if it is some area that you do struggle with. If you're a beginner with Tunisian crochet, one of the things that you need to learn is how to count your rows. In the Tunisian simple stitch, it is very easy to recognize these vertical bars that this stitch makes, and it's easy to just count them row by row. But when you get to different stitch types, like when you get to the Tunisian reverse stitch or the Tunisian purl stitch, it might be a little bit more difficult to identify. So what I've found, the easiest way to count your rows is, instead of trying to identify where each stitch was created in the rows, you can easily identify that that chain that was created by your return pass, and that is easier to use to count your rows instead of the stitches itself, row by row. If we can have a look at a stitch type like our Tunisian pole stitch, you can easily see under the pole stitch there is the line of the chains that was created during a return pass. So you just find your first return chains and you count them 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can continue that way until you find your last row of the chains there. In the Tunisian pole stitch, this row of the pole stitch was created when I did the slip stitch bind off. I inserted my hook exactly the same way as I would have done the pole stitch, and that is why that is created. So it does not count as a row necessarily, but because you identify those stitches, you might accidentally count it as a row. How to identify your right side from your left side. Now this is when you are right-handed and you Tunisian crochet right-handed, but you just do the reverse if you are left-handed. The best way to identify that is this familiar V that is created when you work into your last stitch on the forward pass. It lies on the front of your work. On the side is the side V, on the right side is the side V, but on the left it creates that second V that's on top of your fabric. Now if I take any piece, here is a piece worked in knit stitch. How will I identify this? Immediately I can see there's no clear V on this fabric in the front, on the side. If I turn it around, there you go. You can see your V's clearly, even though they look exactly like your knit stitch. It's easy to identify if you know what to look for. Let's try another sample. I can use this sample, which is the full stitch. The stitch pattern is called a goblin stitch, and sometimes it's called a mesh stitch as well. But you can see the stitch pattern that it creates, and on the edge, on the left side, there is your familiar V's as you worked your last stitch by inserting your hook behind the front vertical bar and that back bar before you return. Another very familiar problem that we may experience in Tunisian crochet are the sloppy sides. Now what I mean by that is when you are right-handed and you work your forward bars into the direction of your left, your right first stitch seems to be much bigger than the last stitch on your forward bars on the left. Now that happens because you work on your forward pass, your first stitch, and most of the time you do not pull it real tight as you go forward. And because of the movement of the hook while you are going forward with your pass, it wiggles this first stitch and it opens up. And the minute when you do your return on your last stitch, you work it as normal, but you tend to pull it more tight. And as you reverse, there's no movement on that stitch anymore because your hook is not connected or inserted into that hook anymore. So you work the stitch and you return and it's left alone. But this first stitch is on your hook all the time, and it wiggles and it works out in becoming bigger and more sloppy. So let me show you what I do when I work a forward and a return pass with the last stitch and the first one on my passes. When I work my last stitch on the forward pass, I chain my first stitch as normal for the return, but I make sure that I do not pull on that. What we sometimes do, we pull on this loop on the hook while you did the chain 1. Let me show you again. I work my stitch, and as I do the chain, I pull it closer. Be careful of that. What I would do is, as I will make my chain, I open it up a little bit before I complete the chain. So it's a little bit bigger than it would have been if I just normally do the chain and return. Then I make sure that I hold onto this loop that was created when I did the chain, so that it does not pull to pull on that chain to close it up. And I will continue. You can see I even hold on to that chain so it does not close up again, and I will continue with the return pass. And I do that as normal until I have my last loop on the hook, which will become the first loop of my forward pass. Look here, already you can see this loop is way bigger than the last one here on my left. What I normally do here now, before I start with the forward, is to pull that first loop tight on my hook, and I do it here in the throat of my hook instead of on the shaft, because here it goes way smaller than on the size of my shaft, which is the size of my hook. I hold on to that so it does not open up again, and then I continue with my next stitch. If I feel my stitch is still opening up too much, I do pull on my second one as well, and I wiggle it a bit while I'm pulling on my working yarn so that it can close from the second to this first loop on the hook, and then I will continue working my forward pass, and that will keep this first loop closer than it would have been if I did not do this step. Another common problem in Tunisian crochet is that some stitches tends to slant. The culprit here is the return pass. Working those chains that interlock the loops into one direction row by row creates a bias in the direction of this pass. I found that not pulling the yarn too tightly when you pull the yarn through 2 loops on the return pass tends to relax the tension slightly. Some stitches have more slant than others, like this Tunisian double stitch, which tends to slant a lot. Let me show you what I do when I do the return pass. Instead of working this chain very tight, on my shaft of the hook, I relax it a little bit more and just give it a pull when I yarn over and pull through, instead of holding onto my chains to keep the size of the chain on my shaft of the hook, to keep my tension equal. So that is what I do when I work these stitches that tends to slant so much. So my tension might be a little bit looser on them than on other stitches that do not have as much of a slant than, for example, this Tunisian double stitch. But you just compensate on that, getting your tension equal throughout, and help that bias to straighten out a bit. Let's get to the most common problem area in Tunisian crochet that we all hate so much. That is that irritating curl of Tunisian crochet. But why does it happen? If you're a knitter, you're familiar with the curling of fabrics, like when you work the stock knit stitch. And you might also understand why it tends to curl as it does. But let me explain to you why most Tunisian stitches also curl. Now, first of all, Tunisian crochet stitches, like the Tunisian simple stitch, curls a lot, and it tends to curl outward on the bottom and the top edge, but it also curls inward on the sides. And I have an example to show you here, a scarf that I made of 100% bamboo yarn. But if you can see, if I just put it down flat, it's blocked as well. The sides are still curling. Now, why does this happen? If you look at this piece of fabric, on the front it's got a smooth texture, but the minute I turn it around, you can see all these bumps and all these yarns, all this thick fabric at the back. Now, the way that these stitches are formed cause for it to want to expand, and that causes for it to push the fabric to the side where there is not as much texture. So that is why it goes outward at the bottom and on the top. How then can we combat this curl? One of the tips that many crocheters gives is that you should work in the back bar of your foundation chain, like this. In those back bars, there is the front of your chain. But I found that this tip doesn't really make a difference on the curl in Tunisian crochet. I just do it working in this back bar because it gives a really nice and equal edge appearance all around your work. Another suggestion is to work in a larger hook size. Now, in general, you would use a 2 to 4 sizes larger Tunisian hook than the recommended conventional hook for the specific yarn weight that you use. Now, that does reduce the curl slightly. If you can see in these two samples, they are worked in, this one is worked in a 6mm hook, this one was worked in a 5mm hook, although both are the same yarn, only two different colors that I used here. Now, I found that the fiber content of yarn also influenced the curl of the fabric. And let me show you what I mean about that. You might wonder what this is all about. As you can see, I made a few samples. Mainly, my focus is using different yarn weights and fiber content, but I used the same size hook all the way with all these samples, and the size hook that I used here is a size 6 millimeters. The fiber content mainly is natural fibers. Unfortunately, the only reason for that is because I unfortunately do not have any artificial fiber yarns in my stash, because I'm really a natural fiber snob. But what I suggest is that you can make samples like this from your own stash as well, especially the yarns that you prefer working with, so that you can see and compare the same comparisons that I want to make and will show you today. All right, let me first start with my yarn weights. I have here at the corner here, I have a yarn with a wraps per inch of 11. Now what I also did was I measured the wraps per inch of all of the yarns that I used, because that will give a more accurate comparison. Because if you are familiar with the yarn weight charts and the wraps per inches that are indicated on there, you will see that the different yarn weights have a range of wraps per inches, and I just narrowed it down to exactly the wraps per inch of each of the yarns that I used. This one is a fiber content of alpaca and merino with a wraps per inch of 11, and as you can see, it is quite dense. And the curl, because that is our focus today in the troubleshooting, is this curl that happens in Tunisian crochet. Now this one, it's 11 wraps per inch. The one next to it has a wraps per inch of 12. So it's 1 wrap per inch thinner than the first one, but it's 100% merino. This one is 14 wraps per inch. This one is also 14 wraps per inch, and these three are all merino yarns, and they differ with 12 to 14 to 15 wraps per inch. But look at the curl. With a 6 millimeter hook, it still curls quite a lot. This one here at the end is a wraps per inch of 15 as well, just like the one next to it. But if you can see, the curl wants to be a little bit less than the one with the merino next to it, and I will explain to you why that do happen. I can jump to these two here. If you look at the curl of these two, this one really tends to just curl up. It's 100% merino. This one, alpaca. This one here is also an alpaca yarn. This one here is also alpaca, but it's got a 19 and this one a 20 wraps per inch. So it's much thinner. But look at the curl. Also used a 6 millimeter hook, but the curl is much less. All right. The ones I just showed you are my animal or protein fiber based yarns. Now to jump to plant fiber. The thickest yarn weight that I used was a 15 wraps per inch of 100% cotton. I also have mercerized cotton in a 17 wraps per inch. This one here is a blend of bamboo and cotton on a 17 wraps per inch. Then here at the bottom I have 18 wraps per inch in a bamboo cotton blend and a 20 wraps per inch in a bamboo cotton blend. Now, let me explain a little bit more about fiber behavior. Let's start with the merino yarns, the ones that curl the most. Did you realize that? This one, that one, that one, this one, it's very curly. The reason for that is merino yarn wants to expand. It is basically a fiber that's alive. It wants space. It wants movement. So when you use a really small hook for this yarn base or this fiber base, it will curl more because of the fiber that wants to expand. Now you ask me, but the alpaca, this one, that one, why do they not curl exactly the same way as the merino? Because it's also a protein fiber. If you know alpaca fiber's behavior, it's a very soft and sleek fiber. Now what I found is that when I use my alpaca yarns, they do curl less, and I really think that it is because of the sleekness of that fiber. It does not have the spring that the merino fibers have. It's more of a smooth and sleeky and also a heavy fiber. It's heavier than merino, which also can influence that curl on your Tunisian crochet. If we have a look, before I continue with the cotton, I can talk for hours about fiber behavior, especially for our crocheters. We need to understand and know the behavior of our fibers, because it do influence our final project tremendously. So do yourself a favor and educate yourself on fiber behaviors. Go and look or search for YouTube videos, search blogs, search any content that you can and learn more about it. It's very interesting. Jumping to the plant fibers, the cottons, I have a mercerized cotton which, because of the process that it went through, it's got a shine. It strengthens the cotton, and it do give it a little bit of a more hard feel to the touch, whereas a unprocessed cotton, it's softer. Now you can see that this one really wants to curl up more than even this one, and this 100% cotton is a 15 wraps per inch comparing to a 17. So this one is thinner than this one. But I think that because of the process of mercerization on the cotton, it influences also your curl on your Tunisian. The bamboo blends, I have one here, here and here. They tend to curl the least of all these fibers. And I also think it might be due to the characteristic of bamboo. It is a heavy fiber. It is also very sleek. It's very soft. It's an amazing yarn to work with. So the bamboo and bamboo blends are one of my favorite fibers to work with in Tunisian crochet, although it's a heavy yarn and it's a plant fiber, so it does not have elasticity. It might, as I normally say, it grows on you because of gravity and the weight of the yarn. It does stretch. All right, but you can compensate on that depending on your product or your project and the hook size that you use. Now, this is the hook that I used. I love my Brittany hooks because they are just gorgeous. And I use them for Tunisian crochet. It's very nice to hold because of the extended length of the hook, and it's got more than enough space here to do quite a wide piece of Tunisian crochet. Now I worked all of them with this same hook, and if you can also see, if I have this one, this is the alpaca with a rasper inch of 20. You can see it's very open. It's not as dense as, for example, this one. But it comes out even smaller, even though you use the same hook size. Keep that in mind. Yeah, this is basically what I just wanted to explain to you in short, that you need to keep in mind that your fiber content, the weight of the yarn, do influence the curl on your Tunisian crochet. And I really suggest that you go and play around with samples and with your yarns and just get familiar with what you like to use when you do your Tunisian crochet products or projects. Another way to get rid of the curl is working an edge around your piece or by joining two pieces together. In some cases, I will even work a hem, like at the bottom of a garment piece. I will work about 1 or 2 rows of single crochet, and I will work it in the back loop only of the foundation chain at the bottom, and then either by hand I will sew it onto the back of my piece, or I will just slip stitch it onto the back side of the fabric. Other methods are working different stitches on your first few rows of the piece. Stitches like your Tunisian pole stitch or a Tunisian reverse stitch. Here I worked 3 rows of Tunisian pole stitch, and you can see it lies nice and flat. You can either alternate a row of Tunisian pole stitch with a row of simple stitch and then another row of pole stitch. Here I worked on my foundation chain. I started with the Tunisian extended stitch, and that also helps at the bottom to keep your work down, because I don't always want texture on the bottom of my piece. And I found that if I work the Tunisian extended stitch, it gives a similar look than the rest of the Tunisian simple stitch on the piece that I'm working with. At the top, I also found that instead of working slip stitch to bind off, I work a row of single crochet. That also helps to eliminate the curl at the top a bit. You can also, instead of that, do the same stitches that you did at the bottom. You can repeat that at the top of your piece. Then both sides it's like a mirror of each other and it looks the same. One of my favorite methods is using a chainless foundation row. It is exactly like on conventional crochet, where you do get a foundation single crochet or a foundation double crochet, where you work the foundation chain and the first row of the stitches at the same time. This is what it will look like in Tunisian crochet. It gives the same look as the Tunisian extended stitch that I showed you earlier on this sample, with a difference that here it looks as if I made a row of Tunisian pole stitch as well. Now let me show you what I do when I make a chainless foundation in Tunisian crochet. I will start with my slip knot, and by now you know that I do not close my slip knot, but I use it as my first chain. So I will just chain one extra, where if you close your slip knot you will make 2 chains to start with. Then you will insert your hook into your first chain, and you will chain twice. The loop on the second chain you will keep on your hook, but you will insert your hook back into the second chain behind the front bar here and that back bar that's created by your chain. You'll insert your hook once again, draw up a loop and chain 2. Keep this loop on the hook. Again, in the second chain that you made, or the first chain that you made, it's a second from your hook, you will again insert your hook behind this bar and the back bar of that chain, yarn over, pull up a loop and chain 2. You can already see how it creates the typical look of the chains at the bottom when you work in the back bar of the chains, but also these bumps in the front that looks like a row of Tunisian pole. Now the only thing with this method is that these vertical bars tends to be quite big. If you can see on the sample I have here, but if you look at the Tunisian extended stitch, it gives the same appearance. That's why these two methods look very much the same, with the difference that the chainless foundation row have those row of bumps at the bottom that gives the appearance of a Tunisian pole stitch. Now what you can do to slightly lessen these big loops is when you insert your hook into that second chain from your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, chain 1, chain the second one. You hold on to this loop on the hook so it does not pull too big. It might feel a little bit uncomfortable. You can also pull closer on that first loop from the hook that you made. So pulling those closer will give a more tight vertical bar, and these chains, let me show it again to you where it will appear, will become slightly smaller. There is the Tunisian extended stitch. It's got that chain that you also make to extend that loop, which I will have a video for you not so far in the future to show you how to make these stitches. But there you can see the chains that was created during this chainless foundation row. Now let's continue and just make a few more. Yarn over, pull up a loop, chain 2, pull that chain closer and pull the loop on the hook closer, and then again on that bottom chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, chain 1, that creates the foundation chain, and this one is just to interlock this chain that needs to stay on the loop. Now if I try to make the same foundation as a single crochet, you will find that you will not be able to insert the hook back into this chain that you create for the foundation chain. So that is why you need this extra chain to interlock and to keep the loop on the hook. Let's make another one. Chain 1. Now if this was supposed to be like done like a Tunisian, not Tunisian, the conventional crochet foundation single crochet, I would have need to insert my hook back into that same stitch, but it's not working so well. You can see what's happening here. Okay, so we do that extra chain just to keep it firm. Look at the difference on the loops on the first stitches that I made, and then it looks much better when I pull that chain and the loop on the hook more tight. Then you will just continue with the return pass and continue with your Tunisian simple stitch or whatever other stitch type you want to work for the rest of your piece. The most unpreventable method to all problem areas, which is quite essential, is blocking your finished products. It helps with the curl, the bias, to flatten your seams and open up your stitch definition as it relaxes the yarn and set the stitches. Now for that, I will use a few items. I have here, which is called blocking blockers or knit blockers. Now this is a piece of, I think it's plastic or perspex, and then it's got sharp needle inserted in here with very sharp points, and it is made of stainless steel because during blocking you will use water, and then if it's only iron steel it will rust, so it should be stainless steel. Another item that I do find very essential during blocking is my T-pins. They help when I need to keep my corners in tuck, or when I have shapy or lacy edges that I need to pull in certain directions to pin them down, and where the blockers won't be as easy to use as just using one of these pins. Now for the surface, you can basically use any surface, but what is really important, especially when you are blocking plant fibers, is that the base needs to be able to have some air circulating from underneath. Like I like to use these foam mats that are used for yoga, or these blocks that we use for the children that they build on the floor, because it's got pores which have some air trapped, which can help for the item to dry better. That is why I would not really put it on a bed with towels, which is also made from cotton, which is a plant fiber, and that takes much longer to dry. Bamboo is one of those fibers that do take very long to dry than, for instance, your animal fiber. Now, let me just quickly mention to you the main factor involved in blocking, and that is the elasticity or the lack thereof in the fiber that you use, or which the yarn consists of. That is why I follow these two major methods for the different fiber contents respectively. I use wet blocking for protein and animal fibers, and I use spray blocking for cellulose and plant fiber. Why? Okay, let me explain to you. Animal fibers, wools, from merino, alpaca, my favorite fibers, any animal fiber, it has elasticity. When the item is wet, you can pull and tuck it like this in different directions, even though it's wet, and those fibers will recover in their natural state even under the tension that they will be when it is blocked or pinned down. Now, for animal or for plant fibers, they do not have elasticity. So when I wet it completely and pin it down, it can stretch out of shape. You can go and try that and see what is happening between the different fibers when you use the different methods of blocking. So I first pin them down. If it's a plant fiber, I pin them in a position, and then all I do, I will use a spray bottle, and I do have one here. I have a spray bottle, and I will just spray it like this until it is soaked. But then my plant fiber, I will leave them undisturbed in the position that I've pinned them and sprayed them until it's completely dry, so that the stitches have set. And let me just show you here. This piece was blocked already. I'm sure you can see that for yourself. This one, I just finished it and it's not blocked yet. So what I will do is, I do have a nice surface here to try and see if my pins will hold into that. Yes. I will even use a knitting gauge or a measuring tape just to measure my piece if I want it into equal sizes, or if I have certain dimensions in which the piece should be, and I will just shape it. Let's say I want the dimensions here to be 9.5. I will put my T-pin at that corner, and in my first corner, what's happening here, it's not 100% square, so this one is already 9.5, so I had to pull it a bit in width, and I will put it here in 9 centimeters, and I will just 8.5, that's what I used, 8.5, I will just check that it is squared and squared, and then I will use one of my blockers, and just look how easy these work. I will just insert them like that. Sometimes I even use my knitting gauge to make sure that it's right against my gauge and in a straight line. And here I have a 4-pin blocker. I can even use that pin it down. I can use another one, pin it down, and I'll use another one and pin it down. And then I will use my spray bottle and I'll just thoroughly spray it. I will spray especially in my corners because those are the areas that really needs to stay in position. Now, because this is a plant-based fiber, I will just leave it like that. I had to beforehand shape it and tuck it the way I need to, but now I will just leave it until it is dry completely. I will take out my pins and I will have my blocked item like this one. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you found anything valuable, please share this with your crochet friends. Also, you can leave a comment if there's anything that you would like to see in the future. And remember to subscribe. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.